Hello, it's Jo here from Minerva. I'm here to show you something a little bit different today, more of a tools and techniques tutorial on how to turn out tubes, straps, rouleau loops, all the things that make us cuss and get us really cross when we really want to get onto making the main part of our garment. All the products that I use today are listed below. You really will find that once you find the right tool for the job, it becomes a really simple part of your sewing process. The fabric I'm wearing today is a linen mix. It's not one of our fabrics actually, but it makes a really good pair of summer dungarees because it's quite lightweight. The straps don't get too stiff. You don't end up with like a really big lump here. So anything that's a cotton linen mix would make a really good pair of summer dungarees. The first tool I'm going to show you is a prim set of turning tubes, and there's 3 in the set, and in it you get a plastic tube like this and a stick that goes down the middle, and these were a game changer for me. I really didn't know these existed till not long ago, and I'm glad I've got a set because I've made the Lyra dress and I don't want a tie belt that ties at the front. I just need to add 2 straps because it's a little bit wide. It fits across my shoulders, but although it's a loose fitting dress, it really is pretty swingy around the bottom. So I'm going to add some side straps. So I've cut a strap out of the fabric. I've sewn across the end and down, and then I'm going to trim that out to lay the seam so that there's not so much bulk going into the inside of my strap. And then I'm going to trim off the corners so that I've not got so much bulk going into the end of my strap. And then you put the tube, the best fitting tube out of your set, inside the strap, and then you use the stick to push it through. And because the edge of the plastic is really smooth, the fabric runs along it really easily, and there's a strap. You can use the end of the stick to point out the corners, so I can just use that to manipulate the corners, not too strongly, just enough to get those through but not break through. And then I can press that, and that's one of my straps for my Lyra dress. Inside the box there's a thinner one for doing spaghetti straps, so that one's a bit smaller. So that's going to be for children's dresses, if you've got multiple straps going from your shoulder. And this is the medium one, which again would be useful for these straps if you had thinner ones, or children's dress straps, summer dress straps. It really is the most simple idea, but it works so brilliantly. I have just opened up the side seam there, and I'm just going to pop a strap inside and sew that back up. Here's the hack that I did. I just unpicked the side seam a little bit and put the strap in, and then this is the front, and then from the back I can pull the waist in as much as I want, but without having a bow at the front, which I don't like, doesn't suit me. I'm quite short waisted. So now I have the back pulled in, which is fine because it's all gathered, and from the front I've still got that buffet style tiered relaxed fit, but I'm just taking it in a little bit. I could tie them at the front if I wanted to. That's not the style I'm going for. Making these straps is really useful because if you make a loose strap and then you tie it on a dress and it doesn't fit the waistline, so you can see here my gathers are up here but my natural waist would be there, it does look a bit messy. So having 2 straps that just tie loosely at the back can just change that shape. Did you see that there? It just nipped in, but enough to keep it a relaxed fit. Another tool you could try is a loop turner, which is a metal wire that doesn't bend. It's got a loop on the end for you to put your finger through, and on the end it's got a hook and a little latch that moves backwards and forwards. That helps you hook it onto the fabric. I'm just showing you against my sleeve there. And that can go into a small tube, hook on the end, and then you can gently pull it back through. I'll show you that on this little bit of fabric. So you put the hook in the end, and then you just try and get it to pull. And you've got to keep the tension on it so that the hook doesn't come out. And you don't want to do it too quickly, because otherwise it all bunches up. If you go like that, you'll get it all too bunched up. So you need to draw it through a little bit at a time. And then you can take your hook off the end. It's always good just to have a little bit of spare fabric on the end, so that if your hook makes a little hole in the fabric, you've not got your strap measured to the very end. And then you can get these little spaghetti straps. The first thing to do is to make a chain, a thread chain, just longer than your piece of fabric. And then with the foot and the needle up, you fold the fabric in half, but you put the thread chain that you've just made down the centre of your piece of jersey. Fold it over, engage the foot, keep your thread out of the way, and then overlock down the side. Now that thread chain that you put through the middle can be used to pull the loop through. So it just takes a little bit of manipulation to get the end through, and then you can pull through a very, very narrow jersey loop. That's a really, really slim loop that would have been quite difficult to turn through with your tube turners, but it's great if you're making sportswear or you're having like cross strap detail on the back of a jumpsuit. If you need to make lots of roller loops, I suggest you make one long one and then cut it into smaller pieces. Because if you try to make lots of small ones, you do sometimes, by using the loop turner, you do sometimes unthread the end a little bit. So it's a really good idea, if you sew it, to use some fray stop. Fray stop is a fabric glue. I'm going to show you how to make one long roller loop and then add the glue to stop each one fraying at the ends. So I've sewn down my loop. I've got one end that's very long. I'm going to trim off the seam, because the smaller the roller loop now, the less and less fabric you need to be having trying to be stuffed into the middle. So I'm going to trim that off, but obviously I'm getting really, really close to the edges. And then I'm going to put a little bit of fray stop on this end and this end, and then I'm going to pull it through and make sure I stop where I want to cut my rouleau loops. I'm just going to put a little bit on that end and a little bit on that end. Just rub that in, rub that in. So now when I pull through this very small piece, the ends won't start coming undone under the stress of me turning it through the other way. I'm going to use a large darning needle, or some people call it a bodkin, and I'm going to thread the needle and then take that back through the centre of the rouleau loop before the glue dries, and to move that along. And again, it's a very slow process. If you pull it too fast, you won't be able to manipulate the end to get it to go inside itself. And if you haven't trimmed enough off your seam allowance, you will find out now, because too much seam allowance won't get you to go back through the loop. Sorry, it's scooting all over the place. So they're not fraying at the ends, because I've got a little bit of fray stop, but that's a pretty small rouleau loop. I'm going to pressed it, and now I'm going to cut this into 3. So you can see I can get a pretty small loop, and that needs to be sewn as quickly as possible. You don't want to be hanging around with that. You want to make sure that the ends aren't fraying anymore, because now you've just cut new ends. You could put some fray stop on those if there was going to be a time when you knew they would be hanging around a little bit. You can get a lot out of that. There's 3, and that's using a darning needle or bodkin. So hopefully I've shown you a technique you might not have known today. There's adding straps to a dress, and I turn those through with the prim tube turners and straightened out the end with the stick. I used an overlocker to make a jersey spaghetti strap. We used the loop turner, which was useful for just making some small straps with woven fabric, and we used the bodkin to pull through some really tiny rouleau loops. Thank you for watching. I hope that's helped you so that you can make a choice on which tool might be most useful for you. It depends if you're making a larger strap or a little tiny rouleau loop, but to have a few tools in your arsenal are really good for getting on with the rest of the project.